I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. That oath is a prerequisite to military service. Every service member has recited it, including Reggie, who joined our platoon shortly before we left for Kuwait and Iraq in January of 2003. And 10 months later, when he finally received the opportunity to take some well-deserved vacation from a war zone, Reggie went home. But he never came back. We waited. We reached out. We sent emails. We made phone calls. We contacted family members. But eventually, Reggie was arrested for a traffic violation and sent to federal prison for deserting his unit in a time of war. I was heartbroken. Reggie was no villain. He worked hard. He took care of his teammates. He put everything he had into the mission when he was there. But in the end, he failed to fulfill an oath he had freely undertaken, an oath that all of us depended upon, an oath meant to shape his conduct years after he had spoken its words. That's what oaths are. Oaths are voluntary. No one can force the sincerity of our words. Oaths are transformational. When we make an oath, we accept obligations that didn't exist before. And oaths are binding. Once spoken, they tie our futures to a promise made in the present moment. And all of this is true for the defining commitments of our lives: marriage, parenthood, leadership, citizenship, membership in community. A meaningful promise always limits some possibilities in order to create new ones. It says that certain responsibilities are now an essential part of who we are. In this week's Parsha, Matot, the first of the double portion Matot Maseh that we read this weekend, begins by reminding us precisely how oaths work. Ish ki yidor neder ladonai, o hishava shvua le'asor isar al nafsho, lo yachel devaro, kacha hayotze mipiv ya'atzeh. If anyone makes a vow to the Eternal or swears an oath, they must not break their word. They shall do all that has gone forth from their mouth. Now the Hebrew phrase lo yachel devaro, often translated as they shall not break their word, but as the sage Rashi teaches, the word yachel, which we're interpreting here as break, really means to profane or to defile. In essence, taking something holy and making it mundane. The Torah isn't simply prohibiting dishonesty, it's teaching us that our words cannot be treated lightly. When we make a promise, we create a moral reality that didn't exist before, one defined by the obligations that we have freely accepted upon ourselves. When we give our word, we reveal something about what our souls are prepared to stand behind. The rabbis of the Talmud illustrate the significance afforded our words while discussing something quite different, a business agreement that has not yet been enacted. Technically, according to law, one party can still withdraw. And yet the sages insist that a man or a woman of integrity cannot do so. Because, as they say, one's yes should always mean yes, and one's no should always mean no. In other words, though the law may permit us to walk away from a promise, the integrity that our tradition demands from us forbids it. Why? Because if our word can be so easily broken, then our people's 3,000-year-old story, along with everything that it demands from us and everything it means for us, becomes meaningless. What distinguishes Judaism from other beliefs is not what we profess to believe. Beliefs, after all, are immaterial and thus at their core insubstantial. Rather, what defines our tradition, according to the 20th century philosopher Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, is our covenant, a promise freely entered by both parties between the Jewish people and the divine, a promise that binds every Jew born or welcomed into our tradition since it was first made thousands of years ago, a promise that limits our choices and compels us to live a life guided by principle, by memory, and by tradition. A promise that has forever changed us as the Jewish people. By that definition, to be Jewish is somewhat antithetical to 21st century culture, which often scoffs at the very notion of obligation and regards freedom as the ability to keep all our options open. Judaism, however, sees freedom as the opportunity to become fully ourselves by choosing commitments worthy of our lives and remaining faithful to them. That faithfulness creates something larger than any one individual. It creates a covenantal community, one in which we may trust one another, depend upon one another, and build a future together. But that can only happen if our oaths are binding, if our words have sacred meaning. When we yachel devaro, when we treat our words as ordinary or profane, the covenantal community we are meant to embrace eludes us. And too often, it seems, our integrity depends directly upon someone else's ability to enforce our promises. In such a world, those who keep their commitments are those who are most likely to be held accountable for breaking those commitments. Miss your rent, default on a loan, violate probation, fail to return from military leave. The consequences are swift and severe. And meanwhile, those with wealth, influence, or authority possess far more room to evade accountability. A CEO can promise one thing to employees and deliver another. A public official can campaign on commitments that quickly disappear or utter oaths with no intention of fulfilling them. Success may even convince us that our promises in love, in family, in friendship, or in business are negotiable. That because we have options, our commitments should be optional too. And that is how the fabric of society frays, little by little, until all we have left is a tattered collection of strangers refusing to work together to advance our shared cause. And that's not the type of world we want. We want a world in which promises are taken seriously, in which leaders keep their commitments, in which business relationships are marked by honesty, in which families know that words spoken in love will be honored in practice. And that kind of world doesn't emerge from grand declarations. It emerges from ordinary people saying what they mean, meaning what they say, and staying true to our word. It emerges from people treating their words as the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once taught, as the commitments of our souls. Every covenant begins with words, but covenants only last because someone keeps that word. In this Shabbat, our tradition challenges us to begin taking responsibility for the type of world we want to live in by reminding us that our words should be sacred, our promises should be binding, and the commitments we make should be the commitments we keep. Not simply because it's the right thing to do, but because the world we know and love depends upon it. Shabbat Shalom.